Chair recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Director Peters, thank you for coming. But before I talk to you, I'd like to just reflect a few of my thoughts about Chairman Jackson Lee. We sat together for nearly the entire 18 years I've been here, side by side in Judiciary Committee. She came to Memphis for a hearing. We had a field hearing and supported me. And I went to Houston and supported her. She was a dynamic figure who was one of a kind. She was a force, and she was a force that soaked up as much information as she could to help her people and justice as she saw it, and did a marvelous job in Congress, and she will certainly be missed. She was something else. Director Peters, let me ask you this. I've not caught a lot of the hearings, so if I'm asking anything that's been asked before, just let me know that. Following up on the governor's questions, what does a person get when they're released from prison right now? They're talking about this card. What's such a big deal about giving somebody a card?
It's such a big deal because it's a barrier to so many things, to getting a bank account when you get out, to being able to show a formal ID, to rent an apartment.
Oh, I can see that
yeah.
they need it, but why is it such a problem to give it to them?
It's been a barrier on so many levels because the way that individuals get IDs when they get into the community is to the Department of Motor Vehicles. But if you've been incarcerated for a while, you might not have that Social Security card, you might not have that birth certificate. And so now the Federal Bureau of Prisons employees spends time sleuthing and getting those documents so that they do have them when they leave, and then they also have an official ID that is being accepted in 26 states as these individuals come back into our communities.
And then when they leave the prison system, are they just taken out and out the prison doors and released, or are they given transportation back home? How does that handle? So
the majority of them not only receive transportation, but they receive transportation to a residential reentry center or to home confinement. So I think the ability to take people who are still serving a sentence and have a step down for them in the community really proves beneficial, so that they have a safe environment to try to reenter, but with wraparound services around them.
Once they leave the Bureau of Prisons and they go to these programs which are available to them, Bureau of Prisons is totally out. Y'all don't have any, you don't give them any money to have an opportunity to buy some things when they get out, or any credits?
We encourage people to save money on their account for reentry purposes, and but when they're in the residential reentry center or on home confinement, they're still sentenced to the Bureau, so they're still under our custody, which is why it's a great step down. It isn't until their sentence expires that then we hand them off to pretrial for supervision. Or probation for supervision.
On Saturday, I went to Payne's Barbecue in Memphis, and a man came up to me, and after shaking my hand for the longest period of time I've ever had my hand shaken, big man. Anyway, he came up to me afterwards at lunch, and he said, I just spent 15 years in the federal system, and I want to start a reentry program. Wow. How does somebody start a reentry program for federal prisoners?
So they would be able to reach out to our procurement staff and be able to share kind of what their reentry idea is, and our procurement staff would be able to point them in the right direction.
So they go to the Federal Correctional Facility in Memphis?
No, I would refer them to our procurement staff at headquarters.
Okay, okay. They need something, and Representative Armstrong was getting close to it, and the idea that they just can't leave them there. They need help, and so they don't commit crimes when they're released. Has there been any privatization of any federal services, prisons?
So we had engaged in 11 contracts with private prisons, but based on the President's executive order, we no longer engage in any of those contracts.
I'm not for private prisons. I think it's the government's responsibility. A lot of states have done it. What's been your experience with private prisons? So
I'm previously the director of the Oregon Department of Corrections, and that was actually statutorily prohibited in Oregon, so it wasn't something I was familiar with there. And then, of course, the executive order was in place when I arrived in this role, and we successfully complied with the executive order's time frame and ended those contracts.
Thank you. Compassionate release, that's a program I've been interested in as well. What have you done to streamline the compassionate release program and get more people that are old as hell who not going to be able to or want to commit a crime again out of the system and home.
Gentleman's time's expired, but you may answer the question.
Thank you. Then, in the interest of time, I'll say I think the most prominent expansion that we've engaged in this last year has been to be able to include confirmed victims of sexual assault inside our institutions for compassionate release. That was part of the U.S. sentencing guidelines changes.
Say victims of sexual assault? Okay.
Confirmed victims of sexual assault on our watch that they're now able to apply for. And then I think it's important for the committee to understand I can recommend to the courts for compassionate release, but that decision ultimately rests with the courts. But I think that's a really important expansion of compassionate release that we've engaged in this last year.
If I may, with
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Peters.